really, what are the odds of that issue of? I mean, I know that there are lawmakers, especially in the House, where impeachment proceedings would have to begin, where these all of these threatened investigations are going to come in.
Sure.
We keep hearing the word corrupt and all of that.
Right.
But how much of this stuff is really going to is really going to get traction, or on the other side of it, does it have to get traction?
Well, it's easy to get traction because this Congressman Issa from California, who is going to chair the, I think it's the Ethics Committee, if I recall, or House Investigations Committee, is going to get make a lot of political hay for himself. Remember, this is not all about sort of doing business. This is a lot about clash of personalities, and a lot of these people are very ambitious. They love to be on TV, and if they can, fire off rockets into the air and yell and scream and stuff, the news media will pay a lot of attention to them, and they'll get a ton of publicity. And certainly the people who really don't like Obama for many different reasons would be delighted to push members into supporting investigations. So I think there is a real possibility that some of those will get traction. Plus, on top of that, I've talked to people who are Obama supporters and probably Democrats. I don't usually ask people what they are, but you can kind of tell.
Right.
And they think the bureaucracy in the United States has been a horrible mess, has screwed up a lot of stuff. We now know with the report that's coming out on the oil disaster in the Gulf that the federal regulators were just really asleep, or they were lap dancing, apparently, at the expense of the oil industry, and literally lap dancing.
Yeah.
And so people, I think, have a certain amount of sympathy for the desire to investigate what went wrong. What happened to the federal regulators that they let the banks rock and roll until early in the morning with our money, and then when they suddenly said, "Oops," I'm to the bartender, "Oops, I'm sorry, I've lost my credit card," then the federal government rides in and says, "Don't worry about it, we'll take care of it. Here, swipe the taxpayer's credit card." Well, that's certainly something that most Americans would love to know more about.
Well,
I would, at least.
Right. With that in mind, then let's ask this. Let's run it through this prism. We see that we have a lot of folks. We had a better than expected spending in the holidays. We have unemployment figures that may be coming down. We find out tomorrow exactly what the December unemployment rate is going to be. If this economy truly starts turning itself around, and we start, living high and fat on the hog again, it's been my experience, Professor, that that's the one thing that will truly distract this country away from other things. That if we can, we start getting our jobs back, and we start going back to work, and we start going out and buying big screen TVs again, and new Wii games for our kids, the rest of it all is going to fall a bit to the wayside.
I really like your optimism, and I think it's way misplaced.
Thank you.
I think that we're not going to have the big roast beef and all the gravy and apple pie on the table. I think at best the economic recovery is going to be a skinny little chicken stew of some sort, because the numbers just aren't really that great. And I know that you mentioned, I saw this myself, I just wrote an op-ed piece on, the December or the holiday season sales, and there are conflicting numbers. I mean, the article that I wrote was about the story that was reported this morning, that the numbers were very disappointing, that in fact the, consumers were very careful in where they spent their money, and that in fact the consumer spending was largely looking good because gasoline prices went up, which is not consumer spending. Gasoline prices going up is, a gun pointed at the head of somebody who drives into a gas station. You don't have a choice. And so I'm not seeing, frankly, and I'm not an economist, thank God, because they, didn't seem to get it right here for the last 10 years or 15 years. So I'm glad I'm not an economist. And therefore, I'm not seeing in the tea leaves that I read a whole lot of really robust recovery. And I'm looking at the periphery, and I'm looking at Europe, which is an important partner of the United States, and what happens in Europe. It used to be, say that if the United States catches a cold and sneezes, other countries get pneumonia. Well, the same is true with Europe, and Europe is in a very precarious shape, frankly.
Well, you look at Greece, you look at Ireland, you look at other countries.
Spain.
Know the problems with Greece, but
and Spain, very, very serious problems. The British are in the midst of the single biggest slash and burn of their budgets in order to wrestle back their enormous budget deficits, and I think all of that does not, for me, point to the U.S. getting back within a year or two to where we were, in 2003 or 5 or whatever, whenever the bloom was on the boom, as I call it, and everybody was feeling like they were billionaires, even though it was primarily Visa and MasterCard who were making people feel so good. And, these prices that they thought they were millionaires, but in fact their house wasn't worth nearly what they thought it was. And so all of that's going to take a long time. So I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for sort of highly politicized things to happen. And you got to remember that the race for the White House, the 2012 race, has already begun and will intensify. And there's nothing like a hotly contested presidential race to make people crazy and say crazy things and want to position themselves at the extreme of politics in order to really get attention and cut themselves out from the herd, if you know what I mean.
Sure, well, no,
especially
when it comes to, especially if you're a Republican and you're having to run in Iowa, and you already know the track record of Iowa Republican caucus voters.
Yeah.
Mike Huckabee,
yeah.
Please stand up. You have to run to that edge to try and get traction in Iowa, and then maybe you hope you catch on in New Hampshire. But this whole thing has become so condensed these days. This president. I mean, we know.
Yeah.
The Iowa caucuses are in the first week of January. Literally a year from now, folks. We'll know by March who the nominees are going to be.
Well, it's going to be, to me at least, a really interesting election. It may be one of the most interesting ones. We thought the last one was, with a black man and Hillary Clinton, sort of really a different configuration. But I think with the particular characteristics of the Republican Party, which is the one that's going to be interesting. I think Obama will run for president. I don't think he'll be challenged, and I don't think the Democrats are going to have any real primary activity. But the Republicans are now a huge party, but the price you pay when you become really big and attract a lot of voters is now you got to worry about this diverse constituency. You got to go all the way from very conservative Tea Party types, moderate independents who supported you for other reasons, and over there somewhere there are still some mainstream Republicans, and to keep that whole posse going in the same direction down the prairie is going to be a really monumental task. And so I'm going to be fascinated to see how that's all managed, especially since the Republicans don't have a strong Republican National Committee. Well, Michael Steele is the current chair. Wants to stay in there, but he's, as far as I'm concerned, he's just a disaster for the Republicans. And
I read a headline in regards to Mr. Steele that something, I think it came from the Daily Show, where they said Michael Steele has done everything the Republicans have wanted him to do except quit.
Exactly, and he's taking credit for the big electoral victory. When in fact they all along throughout the race, they were hoping he would just sort of shut up and stay at their headquarters in D.C. Instead, he spent a lot of time traveling and spending all the money and driving the Republican National Committee deep in the hole. And so they're going to have to, that one to me alone is an interesting thing, because I know some of the people who would like to take over from him. and some of them are really terrific people. There's an Iowan involved. I won't mention his name because
Gentry Collins.
okay, all right. Gentry Collins, former student of mine,
Yeah.
terrific guy. I think very smart.
Ran the Iowa House. Was
yeah.
in this studio.
Yeah. Oh, he's a smart guy. And then there are other heavy hitters, and so there is a lot of behind the scenes stuff going on, and everybody's wearing Kevlar in that headquarters because there are all these long knives coming out from behind the doors and stuff. So they've got to settle that. Then they've got to get on track. They've got to decide how are we going to manage a national convention and a platform for the Republican Party that'll make the Tea Party happy, and Sarah Palin will say, yeah, I love all this stuff, and at the same time make more pragmatic Republicans happy who know that the Republicans can't win just with Republican votes, and can't have a platform that scares the heck out of the independents and others who are necessary for them to win. So that'll be interesting. So there's all this great stuff that's going to happen, and somebody ought to start running a weekly kind of a soap opera or something with episodes on this, because you could write it, right off of the headlines.
Well, and the upside is, and then we need to get the professor back to his busy day. The upside is, you and I still have radio shows to do, so it's plenty of material for us.
Well, and I think your listeners and readers of my column in InsiderIowa.com and other places, the Des Moines Register. I do a blog for the Des Moines Register also twice a week. They really are engaged, and it didn't end with the 2010 election because there's still so much uncertainty and politically really interesting drama going on, and so it makes for a good story and an interesting conversation. At the same time, it's about as interesting but dangerous, as playing chicken with a high-speed car.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Professor, we appreciate it as always. Happy New Year, sir, and we know that we will have plenty of conversation as we get down the road.
And hopefully this conversation, your listeners and my friends can both listen and watch it on InsiderIowa.com.
Very cool. We appreciate it, sir.
Thank you, sir.
We'll see you again soon. Thanks, Professor. Iowa State University Political Science Professor.